Chapter 28. The Edge of the World. The wind had slowed, and the Prosperity rocked gently, anchored in the small harbor of Avons Island. Nearer to shore, 3 stocky whaling barks waited to be scrubbed clean and reloaded with supplies and harpoons. Thousands of tiny yellow flowers clung to the windswept rocks along the beach. It looked like just the sort of rugged place you'd expect to find at the edge of the known world. I stood on the quarterdeck in the full sun of a glorious southern summer, but even with my cloak buttoned tight at the neck, I couldn't shake my chill. Incense from the ship's shrine filled my nose with sweet smoke. It smelled like a funeral. Rion stood beside me. She had changed into a jacket cut like a Navy uniform and wore her lineal pinned at her collar like a military medal. Her hair had been slicked back off her forehead, and she had ringed her eyes with dark liner. Standing tall and straight-backed, she was a commanding presence. The ship's bell had just been rung, sounding the call for all hands. From below and aloft, everyone made their way to the main deck. The first lieutenant strode toward us, his face flushed. "What's the meaning of this, Rion? You know only ship's officers are to ring the bells." Rion didn't answer. She waited until everyone had settled into place and given their full attention. She stepped up to the quarterdeck rail and addressed the crew gathered below. "As you know, Captain Sangra has been ill. These past few days she has neared the brink of death. I am happy to report she is making a recovery, albeit a slow one." The crew murmured to one another, but there were no cheers at the news. "The captain is still too weak to address you," continued Rion, "but she has written out her commands. I ask our first lieutenant to read them now." The lieutenant seemed very put off and nearly snatched the papers from Rion. I held my breath as he read them over. By the time he got to the signature at the bottom, the lieutenant's jaw hung open. He raised his eyebrows. "Captain Sangra wrote this? You see it as her signature and handwriting, don't you?" said Rion dismissively. The lieutenant threw the papers at her feet and stomped to Sangra's door. He knocked on the paneling. "Captain Sangra, I must speak with you." I listened. Was that a muffled reply coming from inside, or just the creaking of the ship? "Please, Lieutenant, do go in and ask her yourself," said Rion. The lieutenant stopped with his hand over the doorknob. Listrous fever was a powerful deterrent. He walked to his quarters instead, slamming the door behind him. Rion pointed at one of the younger officers. "You, read these, unless you want to go against the captain's orders as well." The young woman started to salute Rion, then stopped, confused. She picked up the letters and read them with an unsteady voice. The first letter thanked the crew for their service thus far and warned of the dangers we would face in the next leg of our expedition. It released anyone who did not wish to continue on with no penalty and no rebuke. At this, Mr. Lark looked extremely relieved. The letter went on to say, "This expedition shall press on past the 50th parallel and beyond to locate our true quarry, the continent known as the Sunderlands." Shocked whispers rippled through the officers, but the crew smiled. As I'd suspected, word had spread about the Sunderland's prize some time ago, most likely during the late-night card games. The letter ended with, "I shall press on with the expedition despite my illness. Until I have fully recovered, I pass command of the Prosperity and all our crew and occupants to my trusted friend, Lieutenant Rion Prosomsup." The crew murmured, pleased. Grebe punched his fist in the air and shouted, "Hear, hear!" The officers stood clustered together, lips curled in disgust. They looked on the verge of seizing Rion, but then their eyes darted to the sailors, who far outnumbered them. The tension in the air was brittle. It was clear that the officers couldn't go against their will, not without violence. I fought the urge to slink back to my room. I'd wanted to stay below, but Rion insisted I stand beside her. I kept my eyes on the deck boards. I hadn't spotted Payoon yet, and I didn't want to see the look on his face when he heard what was coming next. The lieutenant read out the second letter. "Given the perils we shall soon face and the age and condition of the passenger, I release Master Payoon Wongyai from his duties as our mapmaker. May this letter grant him safe passage on the next vessel sailing for An Lung and serve as recognition of his contributions to the expedition and to his country." Lark cried out, "What? Release Payoon? But that's preposterous. He's fit as any of the crew to go forth." Dr. Pinching also stepped forward. "Rion, what's the meaning of this? Who will guide the ship to her destination? And who will chart it once we arrive, if we ever do?" Rion put her hand on my elbow and pulled me toward her. "Miss Sudsai Arawan is well skilled in the mapping trade. I have every confidence she will fulfill the duties of her new position." The crew below grumbled. Even though they were clearly loyal to Rion, they held no such love for me. I felt small and stupid, like a little girl the teacher was forcing everyone to be nice to. The crew suddenly hushed. I looked out and saw Master Payoon making his way to the front of the crowd. He climbed the steps up to the quarterdeck. I expected him to speak to Rion, but he stopped in front of me. His bushy eyebrows knitted together, and his eyes were dark with concern. "Sai, are you sure this is what you want to do?" he asked quietly. "Sai sees the great future laid out ahead of her," said Rion. "She's not afraid of going into the unknown. Are you, Sai?" "I didn't ask you," snapped Payoon. "I asked her." I wanted so badly to look Payoon in the eyes, but I couldn't meet his gaze. I had a volley of defenses ready if he should accuse me of plotting against him. I had lists of reasons prepared for why he should go, and I should take his place. I'd been saying them to myself all night while I tossed and rolled in my hammock. But all I could manage to get out were the words, "I'm sure." Payoon put a warm hand on my shoulder. He kept his eyes on me, though he spoke to Rion loud enough so everyone on deck could hear. "Miss Rion, you are right to have confidence in Sai. She has all the skills and experience you will need to complete the expedition. There is no one who could serve you better." "That's very gracious of you, Payoon," said Rion. "I knew you'd see reason." Payoon's eyes swung to her. "I do see the reason. I see it very plainly." Suddenly, he grabbed both my hands and held them between his dry, crinkly palms. They felt steady, holding on to mine. I tried to look into his eyes, but couldn't keep my gaze there. I stared at our hands instead. He spoke quickly, quietly, so no one else could hear. "Sai, I have made many mistakes in my long life, but believing in you was never one of them. I've known for a long time now that you would make a marvelous mapmaker. Sir, Payoon squeezed my hands tight and rushed on. "I should have told you the truth from the very beginning. I worried it was too great a burden to put on your young shoulders, but now I realize I was wrong. You are more than capable of facing what's to come. Here, I want to give you something." He reached into his waistcoat pocket and pulled out his eyeglass. He unclipped the lineal chain and held the gold case out to me. I gasped, too stunned to bow to him. "But Master Payoon, I can't." "Nonsense. How can you see what you need to see without a good eyeglass?" He took my hand and pressed the case into my palm. "Take care of yourself," he whispered. Then he stepped back and said, "I'm ready to disembark, Miss Rion. I'll leave most of my things for Sai, so there won't be much packing to do." Payoon turned and descended the steps while Rion began giving her orders to her new crew. I dropped the eyeglass into my pocket. It weighed heavily against the fabric, like something I had stolen.